I've been pretty satisfied with my DC figure display for a little while now. So I decided to gut the entire thing and start over. Stick around, because I'm going to be redoing the entirety of my DC action figure display. Let's start out with the back row of the display, which there's going to be some familiar faces from our last display. Now, with the back part of the display, like I said, it's going to be mostly similar to the previous version of the display, with mostly DC Universe Classics figures. This time we're switching to be more McFarlane DC Multiverse-centric, and of course, we're starting out with the Anti-Monitor. I'm still going for a semi-Crisis on Infinite Earths inspired theming, so of course, he's going to be the very center of attention in terms of the big guys. And hey, he's a worthy figure of being the center of attention. I mean, just look at how great this guy is. From all the texturing on the metal and tubes, to the great shade of blue they used, and especially that face. This is a figure worthy of one of the greatest villains from one of DC's greatest stories. Like I said, Anti-Monitor's going in the very center of the back part of the display, with a whopping 2 stands for his feet, since he had a nasty habit of falling over in the last display, and I don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. But let's go over to the 2 figures at his sides. Well, it's none other than 2 other McFarlane DC Multiverse Megafigs. They're Modern Calabac and DC Classic Darkseid, inspired by Kenner's Superpowers collection, which is also going to be another running theme in this display. Both of these guys are great and will certainly help make the back row of big guys stand out. I really love the bright blues on Darkseid and how they pop, especially compared to the last Darkseid we had in this display, which was the Mattel DC Unlimited New 52 Darkseid. Barely any blue on that guy. Now, moving from McFarlane's Megafigs to one of their Build-A-Figs, we have their Blackest Night Atrocitus. He definitely doesn't fit with the themes of the Superpowers collection or Crisis on Infinite Earths, but this figure is so good and striking that I pretty much have to include him. There's also the fact that he's expensive, because, you know, he's a Build-A-Figure. That also helps. Yeah, that red and black on Atrocitus definitely provides a good contrast between all the blues and yellows and greens here. Speaking of red, though, we have another McFarlane Megafig, and actually a hero compared to the pretty much exclusively villains group of the back half of this display. The Planet Ron Swamp Thing. This guy is actually gonna be the biggest figure in the entire DC display, just due to pure height, but also the fact that he's such a big character means he's pretty wide too, and that certainly helps. I can see why Swamp Thing is screaming. He's surrounded by pretty much the most powerful beings in the universe. And Calabac, he's there too. But hey, let's move away from all this cosmic faring stuff and go back to Earth with 2 members of the Legion of Doom, the Page Punchers Grodd Megafig and the McFarlane Arkham City Solomon Grundy Build-A-Fig. These guys aren't exactly as big as the others, but they're still pretty massive. And hey, Grodd is a new addition to this display, but Grundy's a holdover from the last one. You know, it's actually kinda nice to have some characters whose primary colors are either gray or black. You know, in contrast to these super colorful characters and Calabac. Oh yeah, I was lying when I said let's move away from some of the cosmic faring characters, because we got 2 of the greatest hunters in the galaxy now, Doomsday and Lobo. Lobo is just the standard McFarlane DC Multiverse logo, Although, honestly, that logo that comes with Dog and his Space Hog are kinda tempting. And Doomsday is Mattel's new 52 Doomsday Build-A-Fig. Just like Atrocitus, Grodd, and Grundy, these guys don't really fit with the Kenner Superpowers theming. Although Swamp Thing is exempt from that since he was planned to appear in the line, but never ended up making it to shelves. Well, with Lobo and Doomsday added here, I think this is a pretty damn fine back part of the display. But let's move on from all these big bads and Swamp Thing and move on to some small goods? I guess that would make sense. Alright, come on, it's Superman. We gotta include him in a DC display. And this Superman that came in a 2-pack with the Atomic Skull that was an Amazon exclusive seems like the best choice for this display. He definitely looks like a more 70s, 80s style Superman, which fits with Crisis and the Kenner Superpowers collection. I would have considered taking parts from Hush and adding it to this guy to give him a more bulky frame on the arms and legs, but I'm currently using Hush soups in my Justice Society display just above this regular DC display, so that's a no-go. I'm also gonna wait until later to add most of the DC heroes to the display, since of course Superman's at the front, and there's a couple heroes I'm gonna put behind him. Speaking of figures that are gonna go behind Superman, that's what Firestorm's gonna be doing, and this figure from McFarlane's collector line of Firestorm is fantastic. He's got a great body, and also some fantastic accessories, and he's gonna look pretty cool flying in the back of the display. Another really solid McFarlane classic DC hero is this Target exclusive classic Red Tornado. I mean, it's great use of the Alan Scott Green Lantern body, and he's even got this really cool tornado base, which helps him, fly up a tiny bit higher. Really good, although I do hope it gets re-released so that more people can get it, since this was actually a pretty high demand Target exclusive figure. And hey, these guys definitely do fit with the Crisis on Infinite Earths and Superpowers collection theming. But come on, we gotta include the Ocean's Own King Arthur, Aquaman, and since it's the only Aquaman I have in DC Multiverse scale, and also a pretty decent figure anyways, we're gonna be using the Endless Winter Aquaman figure. Even with the fact that he's got that McFarlane side-eye, which I'm pretty glad has been done away with by now, he's still a really solid Aquaman. But he's not alone, as he's going to be facing off against one of his arch-enemies, Orm. Yeah, I would have rather had Black Manta in the display, but I don't have a 7-inch scale DC Multiverse Black Manta, so Ocean Master Orm will have to do. For what I do have in terms of Aquaman characters in this display, I think this is pretty solid. Now, I am going to include some other villains in the display that aren't either a major world-ending threat or just a popular hero's arch nemesis. Two of those figures are Mr. Freeze, specifically the Batman the Animated Series color scheme version of McFarlane's Mr. Freeze, and the Collector Edition Captain Boomerang. He did come with a trench coat, but honestly, I didn't like it that much. I really think it was just kind of too big and bulky, and I think a thinner material being used for it would have been a much better choice. But hey, the figure still looks nice without the coat, so I'm fine with it. I decided to put Boomerang and Freeze on the edges of the display. They're not directly in the center of the battle, but they're here, and that's what counts. But hey, another solid, fairly classic design McFarlane has put out is their McFarlane Digital Longbow Hunters Green Arrow. I didn't feel like keeping track of where the tiny arrow accessory this Green Arrow came with went, so I decided to just pose him reaching for an arrow instead. But hey, while we're speaking on the arrow in Green Arrow, why not we talk about the green? Yes, this is just a segue to talk about Green Lantern. Now, I have two human Green Lanterns in McFarlane's scale to choose from, those being the Blackest Night Kyle Rayner and the Endless Winter John Stewart. But I'm not going with either of these base bodies for the Green Lantern in our display. Instead, I'm combining the body of the McFarlane Collector Edition Green Lantern with the head of the Endless Winter John Stewart to make pretty much just the John Stewart from that Plastic Man Build-A-Figure wave, except with a slightly more standard Green Lantern logo and a lot more accessories, which is always fun. I decided to have John Stewart Green Lantern pretty close. I had decided to have John Stewart as Green Lantern pretty close to Oliver Queen Green Arrow as a reference to when Hal Jordan as Green Lantern and Oliver Queen were the hard-traveling heroes. Speaking of duos, we have two Martian Manhunters to choose from in this display. The one on the right is from DC Direct's History of the DC Universe line, and the one on the left is from the DC Universe Classics line by Mattel. And usually, DC Direct figures are a bit taller than their DC Universe Classics counterparts, so they'd be the obvious choice for a 7-inch DC Multiverse display, but in this case, they're actually around the same size, and I think the DC Universe Classics figure beats this one in every regard. He has an, in my opinion, better head sculpt, a better color scheme, a lot brighter greens, blues, and reds, and overall, he just looks better and has better articulation, so, sorry, Directy, you're losing out to the Mattel figure. Oh yeah, and I'm also gonna get choosing which Flash we're gonna have in the display out of the way before I cut back to Martian Manhunter, and now Flash, in said display. And it's a choice between the DC Essentials Flash and the McFarlane DC Multiverse Rebirth Flash. And I do like some things about the Essentials Flash more, like the more smooth body and also the brighter red, but the DC Multiverse one by McFarlane just has better articulation in the arms due to the rotator cuffs and, the toe articulation. And also, DC Essentials doesn't have peg holes for a figure stand, and McFarlane does. So yeah, we'll actually be able to get this guy into a running pose without him falling down. So, McFarlane's Rebirth Flash is the winner here. Alright, now that we're getting some more Major League members, this display is really starting to come together. But hey, speaking of major characters, we have the arch enemies of the DC Trinity. The Joker, specifically the McFarlane Digital Silver Age Joker, Lex Luthor in his war suit, and Cheetah still being represented by this Marvel Legends Tigra. But hey, in my defense, McFarlane hasn't even made a figure of Cheetah yet, and the 7-inch version from DC Essentials, well, that's pretty damn expensive. So, I have more than enough reason to keep using this Legends Tigra. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, but we're gonna be adding the DC Page Puncher's Brainiac too, because he's pretty similar to the Superpowers and Crisis on Infinite Earths version, and it's also probably my favorite figure from 2024 that I got that year at least. I did have to move Oliver in order to accommodate the whopping 4 new figures added to this part of the display, but honestly I think it works better and does make it look more like Oliver's part of the league instead of a guy who's standing slightly close to the league. Now, let's move on and finish things off with the DC Trinity. And unfortunately, still, the only McFarlane Wonder Woman I have is the post-apocalyptic Last Night on Earth Wonder Woman. And she's cool, yeah, but not only Wonder Woman I have in the DC Multiverse line cool. Although I have seen leaks that there's going to be a Golden Age classic Wonder Woman from her first appearance released in McFarlane's Page Punchers line. So, that's pretty exciting for me, and I hope I can get my hands on it, unlike that hard-to-find collector's edition. Of course, we gotta include the Dark Knight Detective Batman. And of course, I'm going with the Nightfall Batman, since he's the most close to the superpowers and Crisis on Infinite Earths Batman, and he's also one of my favorites. Now, in my last collection tour from a couple months ago, I had this guy in my Fire Escape display. Same with the Silver Age Joker. Now, if you're wondering what replaced them, it's actually the DC Rebirth versions of Batman and the Joker. Pretty much the same for the rest of the display. I did remove Deadpool since I was using him in that Deadpool 3 Wolverine review, but other than that, the display's exactly the same. But guess what? Rebirth Batman came from another display too. He was originally in this part of my Batman display with the Mattel Red Robin and Alfred, but now he's been swapped out for the Mattel DC Multiverse Super Friends Batman. Which brings us full circle back to here. Yeah, this display's finally done and fully updated. So let's go on a final tour. Over here on the left, we have Mr. Freeze firing his Freeze Cannon, Gorilla Grodd attempting to send out some of his psychic waves, since Aquaman's overtaking his battle against Ocean Master. In the back, we have Lobo looking self-confident as ever, Atrocitus reveling in his own red rage, Martian Manhunter standing there contemplating why he has no actual good nemesis, Flash running by and looking like he's about to smack Batman on the back of the head, which neither Calabac nor Batman himself look pretty jazzed up about. Firestorm is doing his usual matter transfusion stuff. Superman, well, he's Superman, not much to say there. The Anti-Monitor attempts to cover everything in antimatter, while Red Tornado also contemplates the meaning of life, as does Wonder Woman. Darkseid, though, he's contemplating the meaning of anti-life. John Stewart and Green Arrow, the new hard-traveling heroes, since I couldn't get my hands on Hal Jordan, and also John Stewart's pretty cool, too. Swamp Thing is angry at the fact he's suddenly been turned red, despite the fact that he's on Earth, and Earth plants aren't usually this red. Brainiac and Lex Luthor contemplate merging again like they did in the Season 2 finale of Justice League Unlimited, while Doomsday and Grundy watch in horror, while Cheetah gets angry at the fact that she's a figure from an entirely different company, and Captain Boomerang grins while Joker tells an actually pretty funny joke. So yeah, this is my new updated DC display, now with nearly 100% more McFarlane than before. So yeah, I think it's fun to make content like this that's, different from my usual average review series, and, if you enjoy this kind of different content too, well, maybe consider giving this video a like. Although, if you have made it this far, no matter what, you should have a great day, 'cause you deserve it. Bye-bye!